My name is Tiffany Allen. Mike Marson and I will be presenting our purchase and expense management applications built exclusively for the Microsoft Dynamics GP product. So here at DynamicPoint, we do build SharePoint solutions exclusively in the Dynamics space. So our company comes up the ranks much like the Bond Consulting Services team did in terms of implementing and configuring Dynamics. And we found that there were some gaps. So our SharePoint solutions have really been built to help facilitate better business automation with direct integration to Dynamics GP. Today we'll peek at our expense management solution as well as our requisition management, or the ability to automatically create purchase orders in Dynamics GP. But we do also offer an AP or invoice automation product, and we do a tremendous amount of work on the portal side where we can extend or highlight data from Dynamics GP via either a customer or a vendor portal. So just a little background on us. As we dive in, today we will look specifically at the requisition management application. And more than anything, as you join us today, it may be because there's some pain points that center around creating requisitions and generating purchase orders in your organization. So some nuggets to take back as you look to internally evaluate your options are, by automating the process, you can really reduce the amount of time it takes to move a requisition to a purchase order. With automation, we've seen that a reduction of 66% with that direct integration into Dynamics GP for you. Obviously, ROI, as you're looking to invest in any type of business automation, is hugely impactful, and we have seen the average cost of processing a requisition move from $30 per transaction all the way down to $7. So just some food for thought as you look at your evaluation of requisition and expense management applications. On the expense side, one of the biggest pain points that you may experience internally for your team, salespeople, employees of the organization, is the manual data entry that is required. Obviously, you've got a salesperson and or an employee keying in it data, and then that data is then being rekeyed into Dynamics for reimbursement. We're going to really streamline that process for you today. We'll highlight that in the demonstration. Additionally, as a whole, there's a tremendous amount of savings that you can experience, over $12 in savings per expense report per employee as you move to automating the employee expense reimbursement process. So hopefully these are some of the reasons that you joined us today. That gives you a little bit more detail. And I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Mike Marson. He is our Director of Business Development, and he's going to take us through the interactive session today.
So today we are going to go through both expense and requisition management. We are going to start with expense and then briefly go through requisition. There's a lot of similarities between the application that will allow us to go through it in a rapid fashion. So a few things to know about our products. As Tiffany mentioned, they all are SharePoint based. So everything is built on top of the SharePoint framework and utilizes all the functionality and features that come with SharePoint. So here I just have a sample page, a local intranet page. I'm going to go ahead and go to where our expense application is deployed here on the expense page. One thing to note is you can deploy anywhere within the SharePoint site. So if you have a given hierarchy and that made sense for employees to go create expense reports and you want to put it there, by all means you can. As far as the look and feel of this page, it is highly configurable. These are various SharePoint web parts that have been added to this page. As far as the design and the branding, you could change it all to make it look like your corporate intranet. Here you see a sample video of how to create a expense report. That's something we see quite often with customers, where they'll post a screencast there, such that new employees could just go watch the video, and then that serves as their training as how they would use the application. Okay, enough about the page. We're going to go ahead and create a new expense report. And let's say we take a marketing trip. And you can see me fill out a few standard fields. The first one to note is the employee field. It does default to the current employee, which is my sample user here, Tim. We do have the ability to create the report on behalf of another user if configured by an administrator. So it's a feature that we have in the application of a delegate. And typically that comes when you have maybe an executive who's not creating their own reports and they have an assistant doing it for them, but you want the report to flow as if the executive is doing it. So that's where the concept of the the delegates come, and that you could actually create it on behalf of a user and it would follow a similar workflow as if that user created it themselves. Okay, moving on, we're going to go ahead and leave the default user, put in some begin and end dates for the report. And maybe we attended a trade show. And you're going to see a new select our new group of fields here. These are all configurable fields, so these ones are here for just sample or for demonstration's sake. But here you can see I have a multi-company install of Dynamics GP that I'm actually integrating with, so the user is going to pick the company in this case. Of course, they could default that if we didn't want them to select it, as well as location, and then as well as a department. The thing to note about all of these is, for any given implementation, these categories are absolutely different. These are just sample ones that I've created, and they could map to such things as GL account segments. In fact, the department will be responsible for one of my segments in Dynamics GP when it gets integrated, as well as such things as analytical accounting codes and things of that nature. You see a cash advance, that is configurable. We see that quite often with nonprofit organizations where they'll actually give an employee a cash advance prior to going on a trip. If that's not configured, of course, it goes away. Most private companies that we see don't give employees cash advance prior to travel. After I create a report, you're going to see here that there's a warning saying I've already created one for this existing time period. That is, again, a configurable option just to highlight me and any of the reviewers of this report that there is a potential that I could be duplicating this. So it's more of a, keep your eye open for this report. I've already submitted one for this time period. After I create it, you see I have the ability to add these various line items. So I have tabs going across here of the various types of items I could add. So we are going to go through each of these individually here just to show you the various features. So the first is just something that would be representative of a out-of-pocket expense. It could be something that was incurred in cash or on a corporate credit card. So let's just out for a meal. We had a steak dinner with the team. Notice that department is defaulting from the header. That is a concept that we have of line item override. So for sake of example, if most of my expenses are for a given department, but maybe I want to override that on a line item basis, you can most certainly do that as well. So it is a feature within the application that allows you to basically default things from the header selection. Okay. So we'll go ahead and leave that as sales. And then from there, we're going to go ahead and pick an expense type. I'm going to go ahead and select meals and entertainment here. When I select this, you notice a new field is going to pop up here, basically saying who the attendees were for the trip. That is a sample of what we consider a user-defined field, and basically is configured such that when I enter meals and entertainment, we need to capture more information. So in this case, we're going to capture the attendees of the expense. And then maybe we'll assign a dollar amount here of $350. So the next part of the report is going to be adding the receipt. So expense receipts in our world come in a couple different fashions. One is you could use sort of the traditional, I have it on my computer, I want to go ahead and select it. Maybe here's my meal receipt and I want to upload it. The other way that's typically more applicable to employees incurring expenses is this concept of a Sharepoint document library or attachment library that these receipts are coming from. The reason I say this is more applicable is most often employees do not have scanners, and they don't have the ability to get these receipts into a scanner, but they do have mobile phones. So the concept of taking a picture of that receipt and then uploading it to a Sharepoint document library or using what's considered an email-enabled library gives me the ability to basically upload those directly to Sharepoint such that I could have a queue of all the receipts I need to add to my report when I ultimately create it. So basically all these could be the expenses I've incurred for a given period, and I either email those receipts in using what's known as an email-enabled library or upload them directly from my mobile phone. So we'll go ahead and save this line item, and we're going to go ahead and add one more. I'm going to highlight a couple more configuration options as we go through this. So the next one I'm going to add would be a mobile phone. So let's say we're paying this to Sprint. And hopefully I have a mobile phone category in here. And let's say I intended to put $99, but I fat fingered it and put $999. When I save this, you're going to see an error or a warning message pop up, and it is a example of what we consider a configurable rules engine. So you see a warning message on this item as well as the header of the report, basically saying that that amount is outside of our corporate policy. So that is something configurable, that you could have these rules and it could validate such things as when attachments are required, or maybe I have maximums for given expense types. So it's basically intended to enforce your policies within the application, and it is configurable because, of course, all companies have different policies that they're trying to enforce. Moving away from the expense tab, I'm going to go ahead and go into the mileage tab. So obviously the intent here is that we are seeking reimbursement for mileage that was incurred on behalf of the business. There's two ways to enter mileage. I could do it in a more manual fashion, which I said I travel from home to the airport, maybe 10 miles. And when I save this, there's configuration in the system that has the reimbursement rate. It's going to do the simple math of multiplying my miles by the reimbursement rate and come back with what the employee is due. So that's the manual option. As you notice, I just sort of typed in the miles and it did the math from there. The more automated fashion is you see this icon or this link here for our Google Map integration. What this allows me to do is enter destinations, or a source and a destination, I should say. So go ahead and pick that, and then we'll do the same travel to the airport. This time I'm going to click the little calculate distance button. It's going to determine my number of miles, the from and to, and give me a little map with my route, of course. And then I could save it. Now, depending on, again, customers and configuration, some people like this to be whatever Google Maps says is what the employee gets. So as you notice, it's just a read-only field, and I really can't edit it. And then other companies like a little bit of flexibility there, that maybe whatever Maps tells me is sort of a suggestion, but then I could override it, and then therefore you'd have both values, both what Google said as far as the map integration, and then what the employee overrode it with in case they took a different route or made some stops along the way. The last tab is this credit card. So these are corporate credit card transactions that need to be included on my report. So these were incurred by me on a corporate credit card that I need to go ahead and add to my report and code them. But basically the way they got in there is typically we'll receive a feed from the credit card company such that we have all the credit card transactions, and then they are parsed based on the account number and a mapping to the employee of who has that account. So obviously our employees have their cards issued to them, and that gives us the ability to map the transactions to the appropriate user. So I could go in here and assign this to airfare. Of course, I'd probably attach a expense receipt or something like that, and then save it. Now, corporate credit cards come in a couple of different options. There's the idea of a corporate credit card in which the employee is on the hook for paying it, and then there's corporate credit cards in which the company pays for it. We do support both types of configuration. In my current example, you're going to see my report total here equals to $1,800, of which $1,300 of it is for the credit card, and it's not reimbursable to me. So this is actually an example where the company is paying the credit card, not the employee. Another thing that comes up quite a bit with these credit card line items is the ability to split it. I really only have one line item and one attachment, but maybe on this plane ride I also had a meal or something like that I need a code to a different GL account, or maybe the trip was for two different departments and I want to go ahead and split it. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and put this to airfare, and then I'm going to go ahead and say that some of it was for the ID department because it was a shared trip or something. So by splitting that, it's basically creating a child item, but it still references the same initial expense and the receipt associated to it. So you can see I have a 1.1 and a 1.2 there. Okay, moving forward, this is probably not the most elaborate expense report anyone has seen, but good enough for the sake of demonstration. We're going to go ahead and save it and then submit it. And submitting it is what kicks off this workflow and approval process that we have configured in the system. Again, the workflow is configurable. I currently have it based on the department assigned on the line item, so it will go to different reviewers based on the department that was selected. So for me to approve this, I'm going to have to leave this view as Tim, who is my end employee, and I need to go in as a reviewer. So I'm going to log in as a new session of who is a manager for this employee. Now, it's fully anticipated that this manager is not just hanging out in SharePoint waiting for these tasks to arrive. So we do send them an email notification. Obviously, they could go in here and see the lists. And if I go to look at my tasks, I should have a new one here. So you can see the new one that just got assigned as today. But again, we do send email notifications. Email notifications could be quite simple, something like here. So here's Outlook. You can see this is just a reminder saying I have a notification or a task assigned, and I could drill into it. Or we could include all the details of the expense report, such as this example with the ability to approve and reject it directly from the email. So what that gives users the ability to do is approve or reject it, and maybe they're on a plane, or if the manager is more of the road warrior type, he's not in the office, he could actually do that directly from email, and then circumvent the need to actually go into SharePoint and review it. I'm going to go back to my SharePoint list, and we'll go ahead and open this up. In addition to seeing the report, I could, of course, look at the various attachments. So here I see, based on this icon, that the user did put an attachment here, so I could go ahead and drill into this and look at the attachment associated to it. Make sure everything looks good. Look at the various tabs, mileage, line items, credit cards, etc. Now, based on the user's permission or the reviewer permission, sometimes reviewers have the ability to edit reports as they're going through workflow. In this case, you can see I just approve or reject it. So I could say the trip was good. If I reject it, of course, it goes back to the employee to make any changes and then resubmit it. If I approve it, then it's going to carry forth in the workflow process. Now, I have one more manager review, and the reason being, if you recall, I split that line item. I split the credit card item, and I assigned it to the IT department as well. So it's going to require another department review. I happen to put my reviewer here in both of those departments just for the sake of not having to log on as too many users. Now you can see there's one more task, so it's gone through the department review and now it's pending the accounting review. Accounting review is going to look a little bit different. Again, I put this user in the accounting department so I don't have to log on as too many people. Not that you would do that in a normal case, but keeps things moving. The reason this one looks a little different is you see now I have the ability to edit the report as it's going through the workflow. In addition, you're going to see this new GL account column here, and this is actually going to show me the underlying GL account that this will be mapped to when it integrates with Dynamics GP. So here is the underlying account that was derived based on, in my case, the combination of sales, department, and the meals and entertainment expense type. And that is on all of the various line items. We're showing the ultimate GL account that'll be mapped to. You also see an accounting tab if I don't want to click through all the tabs, or maybe I have a lot of items. This shows the summary of the accounting distributions, and it's broken out by both reimbursable and non-reimbursable. In my case, the non-reimbursable is going to be the credit card items because the employee is not going to get paid for those, right? Those would be codable to the credit card vendor as opposed to the employee when the integration occurs. Any of the notes that the reviewers entered, I could also take a look at and see what previous reviewers entered as part of the workflow approval process. As well as if I want to see the history on this, there is this full audit log that shows each step in the workflow and who took action on it and the date and time associated to it. So I could say accounting approves, and we'll go ahead and approve it. So in my simple case, this is a pretty basic workflow. There's only two tiers. One was the manager approval, and then the next was the accounting. And that really completes the workflow process. So now I'm going to go log out as the reviewer, go back in as the employee. I'm going to hit refresh here on my screen just so I could see if anything's updated. And sure enough, I can now see the status of this report has gone to approve complete. as well as I have a document number and a document status. And of course, comes to mind as well, what does that mean? That is actually the underlying payable transaction that got created in Dynamics GP. So the integration is instant in that when the last reviewer approves it, it will call Dynamics GP Web Services and create this transaction. So if I were to go into Dynamics GP, do a copy and paste on my document number, I see my marketing trip. I see the vendor here is coded to Tim, who is my employee. If I were to go confirm the distributions, I do see the distributions to the various accounts based on my expense type entry, so my meals and entertainment and telephone and travel and things like that. For any reason I need to drill back on this report and see the history on it, we do include this icon. So if I click on this, it will actually open the report directly in Sharepoint. So again, I could look at the workflow history or attachments or things like that. I'm going to go back to Dynamics GP, and I am going to post this. The reason being is I want to show you what happens when it gets paid. We do have a new tab that, if you noticed, appeared down at the bottom of my screen here called Payments, and that we will show the employee when their expense is paid in Dynamics GP. So the idea there is that they don't have to call up the accounting department and say, hey, have you paid my expense report yet? They could just go look in the system. That is configurable, by the way. A lot of people think that's a little bit too much access for the employee, so we can turn that off. So it's $474.69 was my ultimate total, so I could do 474.69. Obviously, you'd probably more likely pay it with a check run or an ACH run. I'm just doing a manual payment here because it's a little bit faster for me to get through, so we don't spend too much time navigating GP screens. Anyway, that should have paid it and cleared it. Now, if I again went back and refreshed my screen, I would hope to see the document status here change. Sure enough, it has changed to paid. And if I go to the Payments tab, we do show the Payments tab. Right now, that's just showing me the payment number. We can show the check number or ACH number if that's more pertinent. And essentially, from the workflow perspective, that is it. I've created a report. I've submitted it for approval. It was approved. It was integrated as a payable and ultimately paid. So the employee got their money back, and all is good. If I do that trip on a reoccurring basis, I can most certainly copy this and then edit the line items and resubmit it. So that's why you see that copy button. Another thing to note from a reporting perspective, if I want to do some analysis on my previous reports, we do have reports in the system. They do all use standard SharePoint reporting tools. So one of the concepts is like Power View reports. These are Excel-based reports that are basically just published back to SharePoint. And they are live. They're not, Excel dumps or anything like that. They actually maintain their connection back to the SharePoint lists. So they are real time, and they allow you to modify and filter things in a real-time basis. So you can see these various filters, and maybe I only want to look at given expense types and things like that. You can most certainly do that live in the system. So maybe I'm only interested in airfare, and then you'll see the graphs refresh, obviously. So that's one of the reporting options that comes with SharePoint, and its ability to report on list data where our information is stored. So that was it for the expense. Moving on, we could quickly cover requisition. It's going to be fairly fast to go through because from an architecture perspective, our applications are all very similar. They all use the same type of workflow. So I'm going to go into the Purchasing tab, again as the end employee, Tim. In this case, I'm going to create a requisition, obviously, as opposed to an expense report. Do something like office supplies. Put the required date for it. And maybe I'm moving offices because I was promoted. Again, you see this concept of categories. again representing such things as either analytical accounting codes, GL segments, or there for just the sake of reporting. Now, a few options when it comes to requisitions. Sometimes the requisitioner knows the vendor, so I'm going to actually select the vendor now. Note that it does not always have to be that way. Sometimes in companies, the requisitioner has no idea who the vendor is, and it's done as part of the approval process is where it gets assigned a vendor, as opposed to doing it as part of the requisition creation. So I'm going to put a couple terms in here, and then I'm going to search. And what that does is it actually queries Dynamics GP vendor master records. We do not store vendors, so there's no need to configure them twice. We are calling a web service to bring back the list of vendors that are applicable, as well as the list of sites. And now I can create this requisition. After this requisition is created, again, we have a concept of line items. In this case, it's not expense items, it's requested items, and they could be in the form of both those that exist as item records or inventoried items within Dynamics GP or non-inventory items. So first I'll add a inventory item. If I add a inventory item, again, there's this concept of search, and that we're querying the item records within Dynamics GP. So you can see here's all my various items that start with B. Maybe I'm going to buy this black ink cartridge. I'll go ahead and add that to my report, and then I'm going to go ahead and associate that to the appropriate purchase type. So we'll say this is supplies. Maybe I got two of them. Again, notice that the unit cost pulled from the item record, so that was retrieved from Dynamics GP, such that the user did not have to type it in. It could be defaulted based on the item record value. Go ahead and save that one. And then we're going to go ahead and do a non-inventoried item. I'm going to buy a tablet. We'll put an iPad. And then this time I'm going to go ahead and associate it to mobile phone. One other thing, I mean, the whole concept of user-defined fields, if I put this to repairs and maintenance for sake of argument, you're going to see there it's going to say who the manufacturer is. That is another concept of user-defined fields. So we have both user-defined fields as well as the category rules defined within this application as well, just as you saw in expense. So I'm going to go ahead and save my tablet. And again, probably oversimplification of a normal requisition, but I do have a inventoried and a non-inventoried item. So for the sake of time, let's go ahead and submit this. It's going to again kick off the workflow. So the email notifications will apply once again. So I'm going to log in as the reviewer. This time I will not spend as much time talking about it, and I'm just going to go approve those tasks just for the sake of kicking off the integration. So again, my requisition view from a manager perspective, we're going to go ahead and approve it. You're going to see two reviews, again, because I hit multiple departments there. So that was my doing. And then lastly, you're going to see this procurement review, which is the second stage of the workflow. Again, the procurement review has a little bit more access in that they can edit the requisition. And again, we're going to show that GL account number assigned to each of those items in the GL column. So I'll go ahead and click the approve on that and close out once again as the reviewer, because I think that should do it. I believe I only have two stages of workflow here. So again, if I hit refresh on this screen, you can see that it's gone through the approval process. It's no longer assigned to a reviewer, and we do have a purchase order number assigned, which again is going to be the PO that got automatically created in Dynamics GP. So if I were to go open up my purchase order entry screen, okay, so there's my black ink and the tablet. Again, I have this ability to drill back from Dynamics GP directly to Sharepoint. So the next step in the purchasing process is I obviously need to submit this to the vendor. So there's a couple ways to do that. If you're doing it from more of a centralized processing perspective, more likely than not, they would go ahead and print this directly from Dynamics GP or use the email functionality if they want to email it to the vendor. And that would present it to the vendor and then, of course, update the status to released, and then it would be in a position that you could receive it. The other option is you actually see a print purchase order here. I'll go ahead and open that in a new tab so we don't lose our place here, but we do have the capability of printing the PO directly from Sharepoint. It uses a SQL Reporting Services report that has all the various functionality of SQL Reporting Services. You could save it or email it to the vendor, all the things that you could normally do with a SQL report. So it is the online version, if you would, of the standard Dynamics GP report. So that would only apply, of course, if the requisitioner is presenting this to the vendor. If it was not done by the requisitioner, more of a centralized process, chances are they would print it directly from GP. If I were to go back to Sharepoint and refresh this, after it has been presented, you're going to see, or printed, you're going to see the PO status get updated to released because the PO has been released. And what this enables me to do, again, not always, but define a receiving transaction for the PO. So we do support receiving. Again, if you're doing this more from a centralized process, chances are you would receive it directly in Dynamics GP. If the requisitioner is the one denoting it as being received, then obviously you would probably want to create it directly here in Sharepoint. So I could say I received a shipment. It's going to ask me for the vendor document number, and I'm going to create it. Now, when I create this receiving transaction, it's actually going to query the PO directly to get the items. Reason being is that PO could have been updated in Dynamics GP since the requisition is approved, and the requisition could not be, up to date as far as all the changes. So we actually query these items from GP to make sure that we have the latest and greatest data. Going to go ahead and specify a few quantities here of what I've received. You could, of course, do multiple shipments just like you can in Dynamics GP. In this case, I'm just going to fully receive it. Again, I'm going to save it and then submit it. Don't worry, you can have workflow here. I'm not going to go through workflow again, given we've already gone through it a couple times, so you will notice that this will go to an auto-approved state. So it's not going to require workflow in this case. So you can see it's approved pending. If I refresh my screen, hopefully one more time here, you'll see it's going to go to approved complete. And then if I again go back to Dynamics GP and look for my receiving transactions, I would hope to see a new one with my receiving items updated on here. So here's my new shipment. And there's the ink and the tablet that I just created with the two items. So of course it could be reviewed in Dynamics GP and posted accordingly. So from a purchasing perspective, we already covered reports, so that's very similar as far as the look and feel of the reports. And then obviously if I do a requisition on a frequent basis, I could copy an existing one or a template and then make any changes and then resubmit it. But for the sake of demo, that covers both expense and the requisition process. I know we went through requisition quick, but a lot of the review functionality and things like that are similar. So hopefully that wasn't too quick to follow.
Well, we really appreciate your time today. Quick overview, some of the automation benefits or features that Mike was able to highlight for you today is that, first of all, you can manage both purchasing and expenses online with a single point of data entry. So really eliminating all those Excel spreadsheets that are probably bouncing around your office to facilitate the requisition or expense reimbursement process. Additionally, just to highlight the fact that at DynamicPoint, our products are built exclusively for the Dynamics GP space. Out of the box, we do integrate specifically with budgeting, project accounting, and analytical accounting within the Dynamics space. So if those are modules that you're using in Dynamics, that is available out of the box for integration. We're pulling that key data directly into the expense form or the requisition form. Additionally, so many of us live and breathe inside Outlook, so we leverage the out-of-the-box functionality that SharePoint delivers to us with integration to Outlook, not only for you to see that you have tasks, but also to even the simplicity of approving an expense report or a requisition directly from an email. Also facilitating, benefits of SharePoint is the fact that we can capture receipt and document capture directly from a mobile device, further streamlining the process for your mobile workforce. And lastly, something that really differentiates DynamicPoint from other organizations in our space is that there is no per user nor per transaction cost with any of our applications. We're priced with a one-time flat license fee.